Now that we've seen how the online archiving of election results can vary from state to state, and also identified where to find the metadata on several different state websites, now let's look at the process of entering it into our administrative system. We will use Rhode Island for this example. You can see I've already entered some races here. At the top of the page here, I've also entered some top-level information about Rhode Island, including noting that it is partially complete, this metadata entry process. And here in the overview field, I've entered some details about how results are recorded here in Rhode Island. You can also use this field to document any conversations that you have with Board of Elections officials. Once you've had an initial conversation with Board of Election officials and also reviewed the metadata on the website of the state that you're working with, you can now look at the admin and start to enter the data. I will show you how I entered this first race from Rhode Island that we looked at already. We have answers to our 4 main questions, but there are some details to add into the admin as well that we will get from this site as we go. So this example is the presidential preference primary, which took place on April 24th, 2012. So I'll go over to the admin and identify that particular race, which is here, April 24th, 2012, primary for president. The first section we want to focus on is data source. Here you can see that in addition to the formats for the results that I've entered that we identified before, HTML, JSON, PDF, and Excel, I've also entered the contact information for the Rhode Island Board of Elections, which I found from the FEC website. You can also get a link to the FEC website here from this organizational contact window. And then also, as part of getting the data source information, I've included a link to the page on the Rhode Island site where you can find this election. And then I've also included a link to where you can get the data itself. For the link to the data itself, what we're looking for is a link to a page where you can click through to download the actual files, rather than the URL of the file itself. And then for the portal link, what we're looking for is whatever page is directly above the page that contains links to the data files. In some cases, that page will be a page that has an HTML version of the results for a race, like we saw in Rhode Island here. But sometimes the overview link will go to a page that has a listing of all the results for all the different years that we're looking for, and maybe then some as well. Either one of those types of pages, this overview page, or a page that has all the details in a kind of general sense of a particular race, either one of those can work as your portal link. You can use your judgment to decide which one of those you include here. And then finally, the last thing that we need to know for this data source section is whether or not the results for this race are certified. If there is a clear note somewhere on the website saying that the results are certified, or if the results are described somewhere in the documentation as quote-unquote official, then you can be fairly confident that they are certified. If you're not so sure, you can also confirm this when you contact the State Board of Elections. The next section is for election metadata. In addition to entering the race type, which we have here, this primary, which you can see here corresponding to it being a presidential preference primary here on the Rhode Island website, we also need to enter the date when the election took place. Most elections take place on one single day, but sometimes they take place over multiple days, which is why we have a start date and an end date. But in most cases, what you'll simply do is enter the same date into both start and end date. For primaries, we also need to know whether the primary is open, closed, blanket, etc. You can find definitions of different primary types here on Wikipedia in this entry. You can also check with your State Board of Elections official to be sure that you've categorized the primary correctly. Also note whether any special elections are part of this race. And finally, in this section, note whether absentee ballots are included. In this example, you can see that mail-in ballots were included here. The third section in our admin is for offices covered. Simply click all of the boxes that apply for the race that you're entering. In this race, there's just one office, President, which you can see checked here. But we are also including other federal offices as well as statewide offices. Don't worry about other items on a ballot that are not these statewide or federal offices. The fourth section in our admin is for the results breakdown. Every race has results that are race-wide, which simply means everyone who's eligible to vote for that race is voting for it. This race that we've been looking at also has results by city-town, which is not one of our main checkboxes. So anything that falls outside of the structure we've created, you can add in the notes field here. You can see here that here is where I'm finding that the results are broken down by town. But to be totally sure about how the results are broken down, it's also a good idea to look at the results themselves. So for this race, we can look at them in Excel format because there's this downloadable Excel file here. And if we look at the file, we see that in addition to results being broken down by town, they're also being broken down by precinct and also by congressional district. And so I've included a check here on this checkbox for congressional district and for precinct. The last section for the metadata entry process is the note field. Here you can enter any issues that you see with the results as they are available online. For Rhode Island, there is not really anything to report here. But for Alabama, you could note that not all races each year represented on the website include results files. Once you have entered all this information, you are done with this race. Just be sure to click Save at the bottom of the page to submit your entry. The last thing I will note is that there is a space at the bottom of the state record for logging any formal FOIA requests. You can fill this section out if the State Board of Elections requires you to formally request results. This will happen occasionally, but many states will be happy to provide us with their results without this extra red tape. If you have any questions as you go through this process, don't hesitate to contact us. You will find our email address, Google group details, and other resources on the screencast page. Thanks again for being part of this effort.